Okay, it looked to me like you were having some very interesting discoveries inside there. So commentary, what did you find out about other people's timelines when you tried them on for yourself?
Some were easier.
Some were easier. What was easier for you?
It was funny because I looked at my own timeline, and all depending. If I look into the... Hello there.
Hello.
I am on the TV.
Well, you probably don't have the TV, but you get the other.
Head's coming, voice coming out of the back of his head.
Anyways, as I was saying, my timeline for the future goes something like this, and then it goes up, and it gets really big. Now, some of the stuff in my future is very daunting because I see it as being very big. Whereas Alexandra's...
You hear the link? This is an emotional response to a submodality structure. It's daunting because it's big.
Yeah.
Submodality, it's like a big picture.
Yeah.
The response, the emotional response is that it's daunting. Yeah?
That's right. Whereas when I tried on Alexandra's,
That's me.
that would be her.
Yes.
She sort of had a different, her past was very disjointed. She could remember a few things in the past, but when she looked into the future, she had little images, and they were down, and they were going off into the future, and it was very organized.
Right.
So as soon as I tried that on, it was like, that makes things easy.
Right. Less daunting.
Less daunting.
Right.
Wow, not even daunting.
Not- What would if you structure it like Alessandro's, what's your emotional kind of response to a timeline structure of that?
Simplicity.
Simplicity.
Yeah.
Right. Ease.
Ease, that's
Right?
right.
So, I mean, again, we really want to make the link between our subjective response and shifting these small things called submodalities. Because, on the one hand, it seems that, we're dealing with something profound like time. But on another hand, we're dealing with something very specific and relatively simple, like submodalities. That if your future is structured so that the things you have to do are big, bright, and they're right there, you tend to really respond to those. There's an intensity. And, they can be daunting if that's your emotional response. If you shift them, they drop down, they get smaller, they come over here. That's a submodality shift. And yet you experience it subjectively as your relationship to the future. You can simplify your future, right?
That's why I couldn't do my images up here,
Right.
bigger.
What happened when you attempted to model Ron, make yours up there and bigger? How did you
It seemed
feel?
Something unreal, a sort of a dream, something that I couldn't reach.
Unattainable goals.
Yeah.
Right?
So I didn't like it.
Now this is it's really useful to track specifically on words and how people are describing this. For Ron, these kind of images are daunting. For Alessandra, the same submodality structure is like a dream. Right? Right. And it's a different response. Same submodality shift. That's why you really need to understand that there are some generalizations about submodalities. What's bigger, brighter, more immediate, you have a greater response to generally. But the response is not always the same in all people. For some people, perhaps daunting. For others, more dreamlike or impossible or like that. Interesting. Good discovery. So,
And it was the same images as well, which was fascinating. You can take the same image, make it daunting, or you can say,
right,
there it is.
right.
Yeah,
And suddenly, boom, you're in a much more resourceful state to begin to deal with that.
absolutely.
Right. Cool.
Ron, does that have
Thank
to do
you.
with the impatience thing you were talking about yesterday?
What's that?
You said something about being impatient, about you want it all now.
Sometimes. I don't know if it necessarily means that. Sometimes I don't see the steps, do you know what I mean? Sometimes I just see the end result, and that can be, I become very impatient. I don't want to do the middle.
But check it out. If the middle's not represented, and all you see is the end result, and that's what you want, there would be this kind of, I want this now,
Yeah.
right? And this middle stuff, why do I have to bother with this? This is the thing. Right?
Exactly.
So one way to begin to explore that is you have some big goal, a goal that you really want to achieve. And the first thing you might want to do is to make it a little bit easier, is to begin to drop it down and think about it over here, and then look at the sequence of events that might
Yeah,
lead
they're
up to that,
required,
effortlessly. So the whole thing kind of flows, You begin to,
Even sliding down it. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
As opposed to it being up there and gravitational.
More patient down here, less patient.
more easy down there,
Do you have a sense,
less difficult.
let me ask you this, if it comes down from here, just imagine one, whatever it may be, big goal, that you sometimes may get impatient about, kind of like, I want it now.
And you know what? I see the goal, but I also sometimes put the tasks in front of it and make
Okay.
it that much more. I make the tasks big as well.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So
That
it's
would
like,
be
oh,
daunting, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And you try that on for yourself, you get a similar response, like, whoa, like each step is overwhelming to get to this thing, too.
That's right, yeah.
So,
Whereas I did this stuff in I don't know when my timeline became like that.
Right.
Because I have, when I was in school, the timeline that I had back then was very fascinating. I had a screen in front of me, and I had I was told, oh, there's many possibilities in the future. So, of course, I stuffed as many as I could in there.
right,
And I just saw a bunch of holes to my future. And I didn't see what was behind it.
Right.
I didn't know what the outcome was. And I'm like, well, how do I know if I make the right choice?
right.
And that, in essence, became very daunting as well
Right,
as a kid.
right, an overwhelming future. It's like all these things to do, and you don't know quite what they're leading to or whatever. They're just
right,
all there, right?
Is your hand tired?
Interesting.
So, Ron, I was curious about where your past was. You told us about your future. Where's it going?
It goes down like this, and then behind it. That's where my past goes.
Can you see that clearly?
For the most part, I can bring, it all depends on how profound or how, moving that experience was. Like I can think of some of the stuff that I did as kids that me and my brother did as kids that weren't necessarily funny then, but I can laugh at it now. You know what I mean? And it's like very clear as to what happened.
All right, so
I know
you
what
hear,
the end result is.
you hear the submodality word. How do you suppose he's coding these impactful past experiences? One word we know. Say again? Visually, but how specifically? Clear, right, clear. So you kind of, he has a subjective sense of his past, and he kind of checks it out back there, and every once in a while there's a very clear image. Like, oh, that was really an event.
Yeah.
Very clear, right? So he uses the submodality of clarity to code important past experiences, or ones that were impactful to him in some way,
That's right.
that are really worth remembering.
Yep.
Yeah? How about, do you have a sense of past experiences that you don't really, you would prefer not to think about a lot? I mean, is there any sense of that?
Yeah, and you know what? I can make those clear as well.
Right. But just when normally, what are they kind of like? Normally.
They're normally, you know what? I think my state of mind has a lot to do with what I remember as well.
Yeah.
Like if I say, for example, start doing something similar that wasn't very rewarding in the past,
Right.
boom, I instantly get an image of
Sure.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you think about the driver of the emotional state. We're talking about this. This is like a little wheel that spins through time. So if you're in a kind of melancholy mood, everybody's been in a kind of a rainy day melancholy, and you're kind of, that tends to bring up associations from your past that's linked to that state.
That's
Right?
right, yeah.
So, it's kind of like the mood itself kind of is a magnet. And from your memories, it kind of pulls up those experiences. Oh, yeah, remember the time. And different states they have a kind of a different magnetic pull. So there's a link between what's going on in terms of the sort of subliminal cognitive process and the emotional state that you're in. Okay? Cool. Other explorations? Rachel, you were saying that since it was just an experiment, you can just explore. It was, when you were trying on timelines, it was something that was relatively easy to do to try on others, right?
Yeah, but what I realized too is I didn't actually have any pictures of it. I just had that sense.
Sense of-
my same sense.
Right.
And the sense of jeans, I was like, wow, great timeline. If I can't find one,
Right. I'll borrow that.
I'll borrow this one.
Right.
This
Yeah.
sounds great.
That's cool. Mind if I take your timeline for a spin? I'm just going, wow, this is pretty good.
But yeah, the sense of it was really comfortable and everything, but I still couldn't.
Yeah.
I couldn't do what I wanted, but this time I was like, I didn't try. I
Right.
know that's not a
Right.
good thing right now, so I
Right.
didn't even try it. I was just like, oh, the sense of this one's really nice.
Right. Well, kind of going back to our conversation with Rachel earlier, she was contributing some more about this, about where she feels herself to be in life right now, right? This kind of open possibility, yeah?
Yeah, and you guys have all heard me, even, when we're talking about, what's your outcome, and I'm like, well, I don't really want to set outcomes right now. I'm in a place where I'm not concerned about it. My future is entirely open. I don't feel limited.
You hear it?
By anything.
Don't want to set outcomes, no future pictures. My future is entirely open, right? this is the state that she wants to be in now for her own personal evolution. So it would make sense that if, arbitrarily she goes, okay, I'm going to structure my future and see it, there's an aspect to her saying, no, it's wide open. They don't go in there. We're going to bounce them around.
And the interesting thing too is as like in group, whenever somebody was like, well, and I said like personal growth. I'm like, that's about where
Right.
that's what I want to work on.
Right.
That's about it. And
Yeah.
it was kind of like, okay, well, let's get more specific than that. And I instantly went, ugh! It was just
Right.
like, no,
Right.
I don't want
Right.
to. And I mean,
Right.
that, like thinking of it in hindsight at the time, it was like, no, I really don't want to. No, that
Right.
doesn't feel comfortable.
Right.
But when I really tried it on, I was like, it felt like somewhat like yesterday. It was like, really like, no, that's a really, really, really bad idea for me right now.
Right. And you have to trust these aspects of self, right? There's a wisdom to the unconscious, to the processes that we all go through, that if we become sensitive to those, then our experiences suddenly make a lot of sense. Rather than, am I going nuts? It's
Yeah.
like, no, this is exactly where I need and want to be right now, right? So it's this thing also of respecting the other's model of the world.
Well, and it also, like Henrik said something about, he's like, wow, that's what I'm going for. He's like, I really want to let go of time more. And I
Right.
was like,
Right.
oh, right. This isn't, and it's like the more I heard, the more I calmed down. Yeah, I laid in bed forever thinking, no, it just is a lot more comfortable. It just, yesterday, it was just the shock of
Sure.
it all really got me.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, really, a lot of work with NLP, not only for us in a training, but when you're working with clients, working with individuals in the real world, for them, it's the same kind of thing. They're exploring things they have never even known existed, right? And so there's this, wow, or sometimes this, whatever the response is. So be aware of that.
I'd just like to share what happened to me was trying on Jim's timeline. Sorry.
One moment, please. Yeah, let me have some slack in the wire, and we'll just do this little thing. I'll be the MC. Voila. This guy can stay like that.
I think what happened to me just now was like
Well, I know what happened to me. It was a huge revelation. And because I think I showed you before that my timeline in the past was over there, and so I could see it to some extent. And over there I could see it to some extent because I'd moved it. And I tried on the through time timeline of going straight across before, and it didn't really feel right. And I think I told you about trying to install the planner. Simplest of simplest things is to do what Jim does, which is have the past over there.
Uh-huh.
And as soon as I did that, I got a huge emotional response of how the heck did I never think of doing that
Right.
before?
No, I could have had a V8.
Yeah, stupid.
Yeah, why?
And it's just so comfortable and so resourceful,
Right.
and I've gone through. Yeah, it's magic.
Right. It is magic. On the one hand, this is so simple. You've got a past that, for whatever reason, is structured behind you. It's not that you can't access those experiences, but there's sort of a degree of the intent of consciousness. It's not an effort, but there's some motive force where you have to kind of, do something to retrieve memories or to review the past, yeah? And a very simple thing, you take your timeline and you have the subjective experience of bringing it around here, where suddenly in your peripheral vision or right there, wow, it's all right there. It's like recovering all of that with no effort. So all of those past experiences, resources that you used to have to hunt for and kind of dig through, the files to find, right, hard work, right, are suddenly right here. And the more familiar you get to that, the more available it is to you. Right? So, I mean, again, on the surface of it, you're doing this. You're doing, oh, but the subjective response to that can be very profound. Cool. Yes. Gene.
So I had a unique experience when I tried on Gene's timeline, and it's a reverse of mine. He has, in his future, he has a little uplift in his timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And when I tried it on, it was kind of neat because in my timeline, the future is sort of, the near future is kind of on the clearer side, but it's the future seems to be kind of opaque or not too clear.
Right, submodalities again, opaque, not too clear.
And when I tried on jeans, there didn't. It's a little difficult to describe. It's not a certain clearness, but a certain sense in my mind of sort of relief. Of there's a positive sort of approach there.
Right. There's a lot more to the future.
Right.
Right. You can see more. A
Yeah.
relief. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, it goes on.
Yeah.
Rather than
exactly.
it kind of gets opaque, and I'm not too sure about that.
Right.
Right. It's
Yeah.
like, whoa, there it is.
Yeah. The other thing too is that in my timeline, I often reflect on the past to determine what's going to be happening.
And how do you do that? When you reflect on the past.
Well, how do you mean? How do I do that?
Well, I mean, demonstrate to me what the structure of your past timeline for you is like. Is it behind you? Is it over here?
Oh no, it's off to my here.
Okay. And the future for you?
The future
Gesture.
for me is
Ooh, interesting. Wow. So the past is out over here, right? The future, it kind of goes back over there, all right? So the reversal, genes was first flip the direction. The future came out and up here, right?
yes.
And the past came out kind of over here.
Right.
Right, okay.
So the past took on less importance than the future.
Does it make sense? Because in his previous timeline, the past was most in his awareness, in a sense. The future was kind of difficult to get to. When he made the shift, the past took on less significance. The future was more in your awareness.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And then what I want to also mention is that having done previous timeline work, I'm ready to move my timeline as I might say as necessary.
Right.
And I think I'll be kind of moving into Gene's timeline a little bit more frequently.
Great. Let me ask you this. How did it feel to have a sense of your future over here and a sense of your past over here? That feel okay?
Yeah, it almost felt, I might say, more natural.
Remember
It
yesterday?
felt like I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
It felt like I was releasing control or attempting to control.
Right. And this one just sort of, that feels kind of
Yeah,
a little bit more. Don't have to, just feels right.
right.
Now, you remember yesterday when I was observing eye accessing cues here, and your original structure of timeline was not congruent with eye accessing cues. His original one had his past coming over here, which in standard eye accessing cues or general eye accessing cues is visual construct, right? But he had his past over here, which should be, to be congruent, visual remembered, which should be on the left. That you can usefully often shift timelines in this way to make them congruent with eye accessing cues. If a person tends to be reversed in terms of accessing cues, then it would be the reverse for the timeline too. Visual remembered, visual construct, past, future, feels more congruent. Right? So that's one that's really worth exploring. Cool. Right on.
If the person right with his left hand, what about the future on the
It
top?
doesn't really seem to, in NLP we've looked at that a great deal, and there doesn't seem to be any consistent link between handedness and eye accessing. Eye accessing seems to be independent of left and right handedness. Right?
Okay.
So you need to track it via the eye accessing cues. Okay? Okay, I'll tell you what, let's do this. Any other real immediate comments before we take a quick break? We'll come back to this. All right? We're going to take a break, then we're going to come back and explore ways to change timelines and reasons to change timelines. So let's take a 13-minute break. 13 minutes and 7 seconds.